As the war continues in Ukraine across its northern border, the man responsible for a significant chunk of the bloodshed has begun his exile in Belarus. The leader of the Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, retreated to the territory after his failed mutiny against Moscow's top brass. The funding of the Wagner Group's finances are now under the microscope as the Kremlin looks into potential misdealings and the US slaps sanctions on actors linked to the armed group. Well, let's cross live now to London, where we can speak to Catherine Belton, MP, an investigative journalist at The Washington Post and author of the book Putin's People, How the KGB Took Back Russia and Then Took on the West. She joins me now. Ms. Belton, thank you so much for your time this evening here on France 24. You've spent most of your career reporting on Russia from within its borders and abroad. How significant for you was this weekend's failed mutiny by Prigozhin?
Yeah, it was incredible. It was the most significant blow ever dealt to Vladimir Putin. You saw really many members of the elite. They were in shock. I mean, they couldn't believe that someone could dare to take Putin on like that. And really, his image is very damaged from it. One of them told me now it looks like he is no one. He wasn't capable of doing anything.
Joe Biden was just asked by France 24's Washington correspondent whether he thought Putin was weaker after the weekend. He replied, "I know he is." Do you think that's true? And more importantly, do you think Putin thinks that's true?
I think Putin is definitely weaker from this weekend, and certainly those around him, those in the Moscow elite, certainly believe it, because, I mean, no one has dared to take him on like this. And for an armed group to be able to march hundreds of miles up north to Moscow without being stopped, without facing any resistance, the fact that they were able to take control of the main military command base for the war in Ukraine, in Rostov, again, without facing any resistance, certainly raises a lot of alarm bells that there's something very wrong in the state of Vladimir Putin. I think Putin has to realize this himself, but you've seen him going on a huge damage control drive now since the weekend. During the weekend, he disappeared. He was nowhere. There were lots of rumors and there were reports that his private jet had taken off for the north of Russia to his residence there. But since late Monday, he's been on damage control. He's been holding all these meetings with the military, trying to congratulate everyone for standing up against the mutiny. But in reality, he blinked. He made a deal with Prigozhin before the real moment of truth could happen, before he could reach Moscow.
The Wagner Group, of course, though, has been a monster of Putin's own creation. Do you think it shows poor foresight on Putin's part to see that it would eventually try to bite the hand that was feeding it?
Yes, I mean, some of the members of the Russian elite were warning about the rise of these private mercenary groups a year ago, because the Wagner Group took on an ever more prominent role the minute Putin launched his invasion in Ukraine. Wagner Group was given tons of funding, more and more weapons, as Putin basically relied on it to do the brunt of the fighting in Ukraine, to ease the pressure on conscripts from the regular population. The Wagner Group was allowed to basically free prisoners. They freed the prisoner populations as long as they were allowed to go and die in Ukraine. And all these people were given weapons. And there was a newspaper editor, Konstantin Remchukov, who warned a year ago that this had a great risk of it all kind of flaring out of control, that all these weapons were being given out kind of left, right, and center, and none of it was under control of the state. And at some point, it was going to come back and bite Vladimir Putin and raise a very real risk of civil war.
Vladimir Putin's not someone who's known to forgive and forget. You're in the UK. There've also obviously been a slew of poisonings of Kremlin critics in that country. I'm thinking of Alexander Litvinenko, but also the Salisbury poisoning of the Skripals as well. Do you really think that Putin is ready to let Prigozhin continue with his activities?
Well, I mean, it seems that he has agreed to let him go. He's dropped the mutiny charges, but Prigozhin is free to continue to operate the Wagner Group for now out of Belarus. So it must mean that perhaps Prigozhin has some compromising information or something else that he knows about Putin, some kind of guarantee he's got tucked away somewhere in case something happens to him. Otherwise, it's astonishing to me that nothing has happened to him already.
The Wagner Group, though, it's become quite indispensable for the Kremlin in recent years, hasn't it? Especially now since Western sanctions have restarted to take effect. The Wagner Group has earned untold millions for the Kremlin through mining activities and more in Africa. How do you think those developments in Ukraine are likely to affect Wagner's operations elsewhere?
Well, obviously, this is a big blow for the Wagner Group because although they do control significant mining assets now in Africa, they still rely and have relied on the Kremlin and Kremlin allies to fund their operations. So they're going to see that funding really dry up now, and there will be attempts to kind of pick members of the Wagner Group off. And of course, they're mercenaries, so they work for money, so they'll go to whoever pays the most. So this will see a big shake-up in Africa itself.
Putin recently just said that he didn't doubt the support of the Russian people during the mutiny. How does he play it out from here? What do you think his future looks like?
Well, I think his image has been really dealt a very significant blow. He was always seen by the elite as the guarantor of stability. He already undermined that when he launched the invasion in Ukraine, but now it seems he can't control his own country when this armed group can basically rage across Russia and nearly reach Moscow without even being stopped. It seems like he's really got a problem because when people like this don't face resistance, either the army didn't want to confront them, or perhaps there were some members of the security services who were supporting the Wagner Group. It's very unclear why it was they were able to get so far. So I think Putin has got to ask very serious questions now about the degree of loyalty to him within his own inner circle. I think it's a big problem because the war has stirred all these divisions within the Russian elite. Many people are very unhappy about the way it's going. There's a wing which was led by Prigozhin, which really wanted Putin to take much tougher action in Ukraine. And yet there's another wing who doesn't want Putin to be waging this war at all and sees it as having dealt huge damage to the country's standing and to its economic status and its integration with the rest of the world. And they see it as a path to nowhere, and they just want it to stop. And Putin has been squeezed between these two camps now for more than a year, and his room for maneuver is diminishing all the time.
Catherine Belton, it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out over the next few weeks and months. Thank you so much for your time here on France 24, and hopefully we'll have you on again very soon. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.